morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Supply Chain Insight powered by CargoNav, your digital tool for end-to-end cargo visibility. I'm Kate Kirkendall, Assistant Director of Communications and Community Relations for the Port of Long Beach. Today, we'll look at how consumers, businesses, and the goods movement industry are responding to rising costs, shifting trade patterns, and continued global uncertainty. Port of Long Beach CEO Dr. Noel Hacegaba will begin with an update on our latest cargo numbers and what they may signal for the upcoming peak shipping season. Then he'll be joined by Robert Loya, CEO of the Harbor Trucking Association, for a discussion on fuel prices, workforce issues, and the transition to zero-emission trucks. After the discussion, we'll open it up for questions. Please begin submitting your questions now using the Q&A feature. Include your name and media outlet so we can call on you. Now, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Noel Hacegaba. Noel?
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. We have a lot to cover today, including what we're seeing in the supply chain, and also the behaviors, changing consumer behaviors, and how the trucking community is navigating some of the biggest challenges facing goods movement. And I'm also pleased to welcome Robert Loya, CEO of the Harbor Trucking Association, who will join me shortly. But first, let's begin with our latest cargo numbers. If you follow us on social media, we were among the first to hear the news. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Noel Hacegaba, CEO of the Port of Long Beach. And we're here at our beautiful port, and I'm joined by a vital partner in our success, ILWU Local 13 President Mario Medina. Mario?
For the month of May, our dock workers at the Port of Long Beach moved 842,000 TEUs, a solid month. And that's despite all the uncertainty surrounding trade and geopolitical instability going on around the world.
Those cargo numbers are made possible by the men and women of the ILWU that keep the cargo moving safely and efficiently at the Port of Long Beach. To everybody on the waterfront, thank you for your hard work and commitment.
And from all of us at the Port of Long Beach, thank you for all that you do.
The Port of Long Beach led the nation by moving most cargo containers in the month of May. It was an honor to make the announcement on social media with ILWU Local 13 President Mario Medina. I want to thank all of our labor partners for their hard work in making the Port of Long Beach one of the busiest seaports in the nation. Now let's take a closer look at our numbers. In May, our dock workers and terminal operators moved 842,000 TEUs, nearly 32% higher compared with last year, making it our third busiest May on record. Imports rose 40% to nearly 419,000 TEUs. Exports increased nearly 33% to more than 109,000 TEUs, and empty containers were up 22% to 314,000 TEUs. Now, year to date, that brings us to more than 4 million TEUs moved through the Port of Long Beach since January. That's up 0.2% compared to the first 5 months of 2025. This also marks our first year-over-year volume increase for 2026 and puts us on pace with our record year in 2025. These numbers reflect the strength and adaptability of the supply chain. They also show that shippers continue to choose the Port of Long Beach for our reliability, efficiency, and ability to move cargo during complex times. Last year, trade uncertainty and tariffs weighed heavily on cargo movement. This year, we're seeing the industry adapt more quickly to disruption. Ladies and gentlemen, the takeaway is clear. Uncertainty is now part of the operating environment, and businesses are planning accordingly. As of this morning, the situation surrounding the Strait of Hormuz remains fluid and uncertain. But one thing is certain: reopening the Strait of Hormuz is a critical priority to restore the stability of the U.S. economy, and the supply chain thrives on stability and predictability. When a critical choke point like the Strait of Hormuz is disrupted, this affects the entire system, from fuel prices to vessel costs to shipping routes. Even as disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz begin to ease, we won't see an immediate decline in fuel prices. While the Port of Long Beach primarily handles trans-Pacific trade with Asia, global supply chains are deeply interconnected, and stability in global trade routes and fuel prices are major factors which will strengthen confidence across the whole network. Now, throughout the period, the Port of Long Beach has remained resilient, with terminals open and cargo moving normally. That same resilience defines ports across California. Let's talk about an early peak season. Shippers are responding to the higher cost of doing business by moving cargo earlier. Rising fuel costs, tariff uncertainty, and geopolitical concerns are all contributing to expectations for an earlier peak shipping season, largely driven by a busy summer with July and August cargo numbers. Companies are trying to stay ahead of potential cost increases and avoid delays later in the year. Meanwhile, businesses are also getting creative with something known as shrinkflation. That's when companies adjust products and packaging to keep prices attractive for consumers. We're seeing smaller package sizes, value bundles, meal kits, and in some cases, price rollbacks. At the same time, companies are rethinking inventory and sourcing strategies. Many are diversifying suppliers and shifting more production from China to Southeast Asia, an ongoing trend we see accelerating amid tariffs and changing trade policies. Now, for the supply chain, the message is simple. Flexibility matters. In times like these, everyone has to be nimble. Shippers, retailers, transportation providers, and consumers. Global growth is expected to remain softer through the rest of the year as inflation continues to put pressure on household budgets and business planning. Fuel costs are one of the clearest examples. Diesel prices in California remain high, adding significant pressure for truck drivers and carriers that move goods every day. That reality strengthens the case for alternative fuels, cleaner technology, and long-term investments in sustainable goods movement. Here at the Port of Long Beach, we're taking action on both fronts. First, we announced the world's first Clean Fuel Bunkering Challenge. We're awarding $1 million to the first ocean-going vessel to refill at berth with methanol on a commercial scale. We are serious about creating a North American market for methanol bunkering and giving the industry an incentive to invest. We also announced the creation of the Zero Emissions Truck Early Leaders Award program. By making $4.8 million available for eligible trucking companies, the Port of Long Beach is rewarding the trailblazers in our trucking community. And because of their willingness to adopt zero emissions truck technology, these truck drivers are contributing to cleaner air in our region. Here at the Port of Long Beach, we're building the port of the future. And we can't make that happen without making our operations more sustainable. As we aim to become the world's first zero emissions seaport, we're creating impactful ways to move the needle on innovation in the goods moving industry. We're thinking way outside the box to bring cleaner trucks and cleaner ships to our docks. This brings me to this edition's Hot Takes. As CEO, it's important to have a pulse of the market, not just of what's happening today, but also what could affect cargo movement, supply chains, and the broader economy in the weeks ahead. Over the next 6 to 8 weeks, there are 3 issues that will be high on my radar. First, as part of the nation's busiest trade gateway, the Port of Long Beach understands that security is not optional. It is a foundation that keeps cargo moving, protects millions of American jobs, and strengthens our economy. That's why we're encouraging Congress to increase the funding for the Port Security Grant Program for the next fiscal year to its fully authorized level of $400 million under the Maritime Transport Security Act. America's ports are facing an increasingly complex threat environment that requires continued investment to ensure we remain secure, operational, and resilient. Despite these threats, funding for the Port Security Grant Program has remained well below its authorized level for years, hovering between $90 million and $100 million since 2021. This falls short of the resources needed to address today's security realities. The Port of Long Beach has benefited from the Port Security Grant Program since its creation in 2002, allowing us to leverage the funding for vital projects including cybersecurity enhancements, cutting-edge drone detection systems, and video analytics for camera systems to increase safety on the Long Beach International Gateway Bridge. These grants drive the critical innovation that help America's ports to strengthen our ability to prepare for and respond to and recover from large-scale emergencies, which is why we're asking Congress to close that funding gap. And this has been an ongoing request from the port community for years and is not and should not be a partisan issue. Secondly, let's look at energy markets and petroleum reserves. The global supply chain runs on fuel. Whether it's ocean vessels, trucks, or rail, diesel and bunker costs have jumped 50% since the conflict in Iran began and ripples across the entire transportation ecosystem. If energy markets become more volatile, carriers and logistics providers may adjust routes, capacity, or fuel surcharges to offset higher costs. Those increased transportation expenses can ultimately contribute to inflationary pressures that affect consumer demand and cargo volumes. Recent inflation data underscores the challenges. Inflation has climbed to its highest level in roughly 3 years, driven in part by higher energy costs and ongoing instability in the Middle East, including tensions involving Iran. As transportation and fuel expenses rise, businesses across the supply chain face increased operating costs that can eventually be passed on to consumers. I've said this many times. Supply chains thrive on stability. Energy volatility introduces uncertainty at every level, and uncertainty is one of the most expensive commodities in global trade. This brings me to tariffs. I'll be closely watching the future of tariffs. In July, the administration's temporary tariff measures could become permanent, be modified, or be replaced altogether. In many ways, tariff uncertainty can be more disruptive than the tariffs themselves. Businesses can adapt to almost any trade policy if they can understand the rules. What makes planning difficult is uncertainty around whether tariffs will be extended, modified, made permanent, or expanded. Over the coming weeks, those decisions could significantly influence how companies manage inventory, source products, and move cargo. We're already seeing some importers accelerate shipments ahead of potential policy changes. If tariffs become permanent, companies may revisit sourcing strategies and shift production to alternative regions. Longer term, these decisions could influence investment across manufacturing, logistics, and transportation networks. Now, while these issues may seem very different, security, energy markets, and trade policy, they all point to the same challenge: uncertainty. To give us his insights on the issues facing truck drivers, I'm very pleased to have Robert Loya, Chief Executive Officer of the Harbor Trucking Association, with us today. His members represent intermodal carriers across the U.S. West Coast, including roughly 16,000 drivers hauling cargo in and out of the San Pedro Bay ports. Robert, thank you for your partnership and your leadership, and a special thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Noel, for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's always great to have a fellow Trojan on the show.
Amen.
So, Robert, we're all feeling the pinch at the pump with higher gas prices, but this must be hitting truck drivers particularly hard. Diesel gas here in California is more than $7 a gallon. That's nearly $3 higher than it was in February, and it takes up to 150 gallons to fill a truck. Tell us a little bit about what you and your members are seeing out there and what the HTA is doing to help.
Yeah, it's been extremely difficult over the last probably few months. Obviously, the price of gas is the diesel is over $7. And what's really concerning is that, the different pricing models that when they negotiate with beneficial cargo owners or freight brokers for cargo, many of the times I've been told by my members, they are not recovering that full cost. So what does that mean? That means like if the price of fuel goes up, diesel goes up $2, they're only getting about $1 back. And so you could understand that running at this kind of level, it's unsustainable. And so we finally, for the last 3 weeks, the Department of Energy has reported that California fuel, diesel fuel, is under $7, which is great to hear. But the gap between the national average is still roughly about $1.70 something. So it was up to $2 at one point, which is extremely difficult to kind of be sustainable. So from our perspective is trying to recover that as best as possible. Some pricing models, don't allow it because they have all in. Customers are refusing to take some of that cost on, including the ocean carriers. For those of my members who move the carrier haulage moves, it was tough for them to relinquish that kind of profit margins to the ocean, to the drayage provider. So they had to make a business decision. Do I continue moving the cargo, or do I suffer through this and get through it and wait till the prices come back down? And many of my members, because of the freight recession that we've been in for the last 4 years, have kind of just taken that as cost of doing business at a loss, or even just at bare minimum, covering their costs. So it's been extremely difficult. And you could see from some of the numbers of the Port Drayage Registry where people are just exiting the market. There's many factors for that. Sure. But what the HTA does is we constantly are working with different fuel vendors and trying to get discounts for our members. Many of our members have their own pricing programs with a lot of diesel providers, but one of the things that they do is, they offer wet hosing, or they have, above ground storage tanks and stuff of that nature to reduce the cost. And that's kind of helping, but it's still not enough. And we're constantly, as much as we can, is trying to advocate for our providers, our members, to the BCOs and say, you need to be a partners. Sure. I understand this is a cost, but at the end of the day, it's going to hit us all, right? At the end of the day, if the price of transportation goes up, when you and I go to the store, that price is going to be passed on to the consumer.
Yeah, and as we all know, prices go up very quickly, but they come down very
slowly.
And with freight suppressed, rates suppressed in the trucking industry, and fuel costs going up, it just thins already thin margins.
That's right.
But I'm really glad to hear that the HTA is stepping up and you're looking for creative solutions to provide relief. Economists look at the price of diesel as a potential recession indicator, and truck drivers are often the first to see the shift in demand. What are you seeing on the ground right now that tells you where the U.S. economy may be headed in the next 6 to 12 months?
It's still concerning. The volumes that you guys are reporting, which are great, but I think the devil's in the details, right? Is that cargo going through the gateway or through the gates versus going on rail, on dock, right? And so the trend, as and why Port of Long Beach is investing so heavily in Pier B, is that it's the densification going IPI cargo. So our concerns are, although the volumes are great and we need them for the economy, is what's going actually through the gate, right? And so the regulatory pressures, federal pressures are pushing our drivers out of business. And it's really the survival of the fittest, is those opportunists that we call them, who came in during COVID. And actually, there was a lot of freight at that time. So I think there was a lot of opportunity, and the PDTR clearly showed that. Yeah. It was 23,000 trucks, over 1,800 companies registered. I think we're down to 1,400 roughly, somewhere around that number, and roughly about 18,000, with 12,000 of those are being regular callers. So those numbers are significantly lower. But even to this day, we're still struggling. We're still competing against one another because there's just not sufficient enough freight to keep those our current drivers and members making enough money to continue to reinvest. And I think that's what we're talking about is how do we transition to zero? Well, it's very difficult to do that when you're not making the money that you can to reinvest into your business.
Yeah, and that's the reason why the Port of Long Beach is also stepping up on that front, which we'll talk about a little later. But, it's interesting what you just described happening on the ground with your members aligns with what the Fed just announced last week. They have no plans to cut interest rates. And again, it's all about trying to manage inflation. Let's talk about another topic, the new English language proficiency requirement for commercial truck drivers, known as the Delilah Law, has been changing the way many trucking companies operate across the U.S. How is the HTA responding to this new Delilah Law? Yeah,
when that came and we heard that it was coming down the pipe, we got a hold of the Cal State Long Beach, and we're great partners with that institution.
And so are we.
I know you are. And we're really grateful. We've been donating every year $5,000 to an endowment there. And we're using part of that endowment to help fund a English proficiency course. So we're working and partnering with them. We actually have a few members who are sending drivers there now to try to help it. And I think there's a misnomer out there, there's a misunderstanding that just because you can't speak English, you're not a good driver. That's absolutely not true. There's a lot of great drivers, regardless of what language they speak. I just think they're lumping them all in because you're not able to speak English. Now, is it a requirement? It's always been a requirement. It's been in federal law for a long, long time. So what we're doing is we're constantly trying to educate our members and give them options. I think we as HTA look at how can we create value to our members. And that's one way to keep their drivers running so we don't lose capacity in the marketplace. I think that's absolutely vital.
Well, at a time when the market is shrinking, right? You need more drivers than ever. So it's important to make sure that we have as many drivers available. So really glad to see and hear about the partnership with Long Beach State. Let's get back to a topic you mentioned a moment ago. With fuel prices continuing to rise, we're seeing the development of zero emissions trucks gaining momentum. And what are your thoughts on ZE trucks? And what do drivers need to what do they need to do to make this transition successful?
To be honest with you, Noel, I was very concerned a few years back when ACF was being forced down our throats. And I say that because that's how we felt as an industry. We felt that the market wasn't ready The infrastructure wasn't ready. The trucks to service the entire gateway and all the cargoes wasn't there. And we were being forced to convert. I guess, I don't know if you want to call it cooler heads prevailed. ACF was pulled. But now we're seeing the benefits of like the Tesla trucks, the Windrose trucks, the trucks that we thought we needed 4 years ago to convert, they're starting to show up. And I think those are great tools that we have now at our disposal. The next step is the infrastructure. We can put out 60,000 trucks according to Tesla. That's how many they can push out in that plant. But it doesn't mean anything if we don't have the infrastructure to power those units. So we're excited about the future. We're excited that these trucks are actually lighter. The range is better. They're quicker to fuel or to charge. But we just need the infrastructure in the proper corridors, which I know you guys are working on, and we're extremely excited that that we're actually partnering in the right corridors where the freight is headed. So we're extremely excited. We see the adoption rate is kind of slow, and really because I was just the same reasons we talked about before, is that the money to reinvest is not there. So we're looking for grants. We're looking for help from the ports and others to try to help us cover that gap. But you will start seeing that adoption immediately start spiking up in 4 to 5 years as the infrastructure builds up. It's kind of like build it, they will come. And I get it. It's tough to build a station when you don't have you don't have customers. But we have to trust the process.
Yeah, we share your enthusiasm here at the Port of Long Beach. We're doing everything that we can. We're thinking way outside the box to bring as many of these clean trucks to our docks and beyond. This green truck corridor that you referenced, Robert, it's a game changer. Right? We're connecting two massive economic engines on one of the nation's busiest trade routes to accelerate and deploy these zero emissions trucks. And I will say this as well. I recently had the opportunity to visit the Tesla Gigafactory. And what I saw there really left me encouraged. And that's the reason why most of the vouchers that many of your members are taking advantage of are vouchers for Tesla trucks.
That's right.
And so I think the future looks bright as it relates to that. So you and I have talked about the challenges of owning and operating Z trucks, and those conversations inspired us to create the Zero Emission Truck Early Leaders Program, this award. What will it mean for truck drivers who operate at the port?
It's a step in the right direction. And my members are extremely grateful for that award. And we felt that it helps recover some of the costs, because we're seeing, unfortunately, as the customers are not willing to pay on a per trip basis for this change in technology like they did the first time around with the Clean Trucks program. We need something to help close that gap between the diesel costs of operating and ownership and versus an electric vehicle. And I know we'll get there, but insurance costs are still significantly higher for a ZE vehicle. They just don't have a lot of loss run. The insurance companies are struggling with how do you, from a physical damage perspective, have a $400,000, $500,000 truck, and you insure that if something were to go wrong versus a $200,000 truck. So there's still some cost differences, but this award is significant. It's a good boost for them to say, look, we're doing the right things. And there's people out there like the Port of Long Beach who are helping us, and they understand our plight. We want to be those champions. We want to be the early adopters and continue to change the environment, change how trucking is viewed in America. And so we're extremely excited for it. We want more to help offset some of these costs.
Yeah, and again, you and your members are vital partners to our success, especially as we build the port of the future and try to deploy as many of these ZE trucks as possible. So we really appreciate the partnership, Robert. I mean, I'll be honest with you. We first met in February, and I asked you, what can we do to support? You told us what that was, and we've delivered.
Yes.
I mean, you and your members have delivered for this port complex for decades, and I'm just excited to see how we're delivering for you.
Yeah. And Noel, I greatly appreciate it. Our members were completely blown away. When you called me and said that this is what you guys are doing, we were ecstatic. And we know it's a drop in the bucket, but it's in the right direction. And it just shows that you guys are continuously the green port of the world, not just the America, of the world.
And we're proud of that designation, and we have an incredible and amazing and creative team. And not to blow the secret, we've got more things that are coming up as well.
We're waiting, we're excited.
So Robert, thanks again for joining us and sharing your helpful insights. As we say at our alma mater, USC, we fight on. And I'm so glad that you and I have the opportunity to work together in our respective roles.
Well, thank you, Noel, for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noel and Robert. We'll now open it up for questions. If you haven't submitted your questions yet, you'll notice the Q&A function on your screen. Please write in your name and your media affiliation. Write your question and hit send. We'll give preference to people's first questions, but we expect to have time for most, if not all, of your questions today. So I have our first question here. This is from Bill Mongaluzzo from the Journal of Commerce, and this one is for Noel. Noel, you started, I'm sorry, that was the wrong question here. Noel, May was a strong month for the port in terms of imports, due primarily to front-loading of fall and holiday merchandise before new tariffs take effect in late July. Do you anticipate that imports will remain elevated into August and September?
Hi, Bill. Thanks for your question. The short answer is yes. What you're seeing is shippers trying to navigate through the uncertainty. We know that something's going to happen in July. We're not quite sure what that is, whether these temporary tariffs will stay in place, whether they will shift, or even be elevated. So a lot of the shippers are trying to stay as much as they can in control of their own destiny. And that's the reason why we had a very strong May. Looking forward over the next 2 to 3 months, we continue to project strong months. And again, that is due primarily to the front loading. We're also seeing inventory levels reach the point where they need to be replenished. And I'm also hearing from ocean carriers who are building out their networks and their services in the months ahead. And they're telling me, Bill, that they're expanding their services, they're adding additional strings. And so we're beginning to see signs that this year may turn out to be another strong year.
Thank you, Noel. And this next question is for Robert, and this one comes from Stas Margaronis from the American Journal of Transportation. Robert, what impact do you think the new battery-powered zero-emission Tesla Semi with a 500-mile range per charge could have on the future of California harbor trucking? Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, Stas. Thank you for the question. It's significant as long as the charging's there. Many of the stations that are deployed today have CCS charging. Very minimal have MCS charging. So as that conversion happens and those providers are changing their stations and upgrading, I think you'll start seeing the big adoption rate, specifically in the Central Valley, in Nevada region, where cargo would have to be decreased in every container because of the traditional weight of an electric vehicle. So the Tesla is a great example, and its, I guess, sister truck, Windrose, very much where it's at 20,000 pounds, 22,000 pounds with the 2,000 pounds exemption for a ZE vehicle in California. We're hearing from some of our members that are currently deploying the Tesla truck in the Central Valley, hauling 44,000 pounds. That's almost as equivalent to hauling it with a diesel truck at 18,000 pounds or 16,000 pound truck. So the parity's almost there. And we're excited about that because the range is there. And to be honest with you, all we're hearing is positive things from the drivers. Yeah. They're better night's sleep. It's less noisy. Yeah. It's quiet. It's clean. So we're extremely excited. And so hopefully, Stas, that answered your question. But we're excited for that adoption as long as the infrastructure is there.
And let me jump on that because infrastructure is key. At the Port of Long Beach, we have 102 charging stations. Yep. That's the most of any port in the world. And we're adding another 92. But what's really going to be a game changer, when you pair that Tesla Semi that you just mentioned, right, Robert, with the Green Truck Corridor, and you're deploying these game-changing trucks on this corridor, we're installing new charging stations on the other side. That is how we get to the infrastructure. That's how we get to a corridor that truly incentivizes and accelerates these EZE trucks.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've been talking about is it's great to have these units, and I'm glad they're finally coming to fruition. Yeah. It's putting these stations where the freight is actually going or starting from, right? And so just placing a station anywhere there's power doesn't really help us if there's not freight going into that area. So great point,
Yeah, there's already 300,000 TUs between the Port of Long Beach and the Central Valley today. So you talk about critical mass, you deploy these Tesla trucks, you're going to have an immediate impact.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, great stuff. That actually answered one of the other questions we had about the Green Truck Corridor partnerships and the importance of those. So thank you for diving in on that. And if we don't have any other questions, I think this will be our final question. And this one is for Noel. Noel, you started as CEO on January 1, 6 months in. What has surprised you about the role?
That's a very interesting question. I hit the ground running, haven't stopped, haven't really had a lot of time to reflect. But one thing I would say is what has surprised me the most is how much we can do in so little time. And that's a lesson for me that you don't have to slow roll things. You can act and make an immediate impact. And the greatest support I've received is from all of our stakeholders. Meeting with them directly, hearing from them directly, understanding what their challenges are, and then being able to be in a position to respond and to offer solutions has been the most rewarding thing for me yet. And Robert, you and your members are testament to that.
Well, it's refreshing to see somebody with so much energy and ideas and outside the box thinking, and your staff just needed to be unleashed. And I think you're the right person to have let that happen, because you could see the ideas coming. And it's amazing what you've done in the short 6 months period. We're extremely grateful and excited for it.
Thank you very much. An incredible team that's behind me. So very, very pleased and blessed with the opportunity.
All right, great. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Noel. And it's back to you, Noel.
Thank you, Kate. I'd like to invite our media partners to a couple of events we're holding over the next several days. Join us at noon this Thursday as we celebrate the one-year anniversary of trucking company Bali Express's service and their efforts to green its cargo movement between Long Beach and Mexico. You heard that. We're going international now. Robert, I would like to officially invite you to join us tomorrow, and hope to see you and our media friends there as well. And then next Monday at noon, we're showcasing the progress we're making to build the port of the future, thanks to the historic $383 million state grant we received in 2023 through the Port and Freight Infrastructure Program. We'll demonstrate zero emissions cargo handling equipment, hovercraft, charging infrastructure, shore power, and a battery plug-in tugboat that we've purchased so far through the PFIP grant. And we'll be joined by a very special guest, California State Transportation Agency Secretary Dr. Tokes Omashakin, representatives from SSA terminals, and others for this very special event. And in just a few weeks, our country will celebrate its 250th birthday. And it's a reminder of the strength and innovation and perseverance that have defined America for generations. As a gateway for American trade and commerce, we are proud to play a small role in supporting that legacy. I hope that all of you enjoy the celebrations that will be taking place in your communities as we honor this remarkable milestone in our nation's history. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Supply Chain Insight. We hope to see you next time.